You know, gardening advice is full of myths, and honestly, one of the worst is telling you that you need to keep buying bags of soil for your raised beds every season. If you're still doing that, you're just throwing money away, and more importantly, you're actually stunting your soil's potential. I've tested raised beds, backyard gardens, and even hydroponic systems for years, and I can tell you a single waste layer applied correctly can transform your soil year after year, creating an almost infinite resource without constantly reaching for new bags. If you want results instead of just surface-level tips, you'll want to stick around. And before we go any further, if you're serious about growing better food, subscribe to Farm Logic now so you don't miss strategies like this one. You know, one of the biggest mistakes gardeners make is thinking of their waste. Things like kitchen scraps, spent compost, shredded paper, even garden trimmings as trash. People often see it as something to discard or burn, but in a raised bed, that exact layer of material, applied properly, is actually the foundation of soil that almost replenishes itself. The consequence of ignoring this is simple. Your soil becomes depleted, you end up with weak plants, smaller harvests, and, honestly, more work trying to compensate with store-bought amendments. Here's how I use a single waste layer to build infinite soil in raised beds. The method is straightforward, but it requires precision and consistency. Start by gathering your organic waste. I use a mix of kitchen scraps, shredded cardboard, coffee grounds, and old leaves. Avoid meat, dairy, and oily food. They attract pests. So, you'll want to spread a layer about 2 to 3 inches thick across the base of your raised bed. It doesn't need to be compacted, but you want it evenly distributed so water can move through it. On top of that, just add a thin layer of topsoil or finished compost, about 1 to 2 inches. This initial layering starts microbial activity immediately, creating heat, breaking down the waste, and building nutrient-rich humus right in your garden. In practice, this works for all garden sizes. In a small backyard bed, a single garbage bin's worth of kitchen scraps per square meter is enough to start a healthy layer. In larger raised beds, I tend to measure in wheelbarrows, roughly 1 wheelbarrow per square meter for a 2-inch layer. The goal here isn't to bury your plants right away, but rather to let the decomposition process do its work. Over the next 4 to 6 weeks, the layer shrinks as it breaks down, and this is really when you'll notice the magic. The soil volume stays steady, nutrients actually increase, and microbial life just flourishes. I should mention something that, honestly, most advice tends to gloss over. Moisture control is absolutely crucial. If things get too dry, decomposition just stalls out. On the other hand, if it's too wet, you risk creating anaerobic conditions and, well, some rather unpleasant odors. In my setup, I check moisture levels daily in the first month. For this, I rely on tools like the Earth Scout 5-in-1 Soil Cub, link in the description, which gives instant readings of soil moisture, temperature, and electroconductivity. It's a commercial-grade precision meter, but it's simple enough for any backyard gardener to use. Knowing the exact moisture content allows me to water only when needed, preventing overwatering and ensuring microbial activity thrives. In my experience, beds that stay consistently between 60 and 70% volumetric water content break down the waste layer fastest without damaging plants. Once the layer has started breaking down, I add another thin top layer of compost or soil. I usually wait about 6 to 8 weeks after the initial layer just to let things settle in properly. This maintains surface structure for planting while the lower layer continues its transformation. You don't need to repeat the waste layer every season. Just refresh the top 2 inches with finished compost each time. Over a single year, this creates a bed that essentially feeds itself, building volume and nutrients without ever buying another bag of soil. I've seen raised beds that started at 12 inches deep grow to 18 inches of usable, fluffy soil within 2 seasons using this method. For hydroponic or soilless systems, the principle is the same, but, adapted. Instead of using raw organic waste, I compost off-site into a nutrient-rich solution or vermicompost, then layer it into coco coir or perlite mixes. I monitor nutrient content closely using an EC meter or the Earth Scout Soil Cub, which is honestly invaluable even for non-soil systems. The infinite soil effect is achieved through repeated cycles of nutrient solution application combined with organic enrichment. You end up with a medium that retains structure, feeds roots consistently, and reduces dependence on packaged growing mixes. A lot of gardening guides tell you to mix everything immediately or create uniform compost layers before planting, but honestly, that's misleading. In my testing, letting the waste layer start breaking down before planting produces far better results. Roots grow into soft, nutrient-rich material. Gradually, microbes flourish, and you avoid nutrient lock or root burn that often happens with raw organic matter directly under plants. In my own raised beds, seedlings established twice as quickly when I allowed the first waste layer to settle for a month before planting, compared to beds where I mixed everything up front. Ratios matter. I recommend a 2 to 3 inch base of waste material, followed by 1 to 2 inches of compost or finished soil. For leafy greens or fast-growing crops, I sometimes increase the compost layer to 3 inches, but keep the raw waste layer consistent. For root crops, I leave the waste layer slightly deeper and softer to encourage unobstructed root growth. You'll need to adjust slightly depending on your climate, soil type, and crop, but the principle remains the same. 1 intentional layer of waste, monitored and managed, becomes the foundation for an almost infinite growing medium. Temperature monitoring is another overlooked factor. Composting generates heat, which speeds up nutrient availability. I use the RioTemp 36-inch compost thermometer for larger raised beds. Monitoring the temperature ensures microbial activity is optimal. Ideally, your waste layer should reach 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the first few weeks. If it doesn't, it's usually a sign of either poor material balance or insufficient moisture. In either case, adjust immediately, because once the decomposition process slows down, you'll lose the nutrient boost that makes this system work. Here's a trade-off to be clear about. This method requires patience and active monitoring. If you just dump kitchen scraps and expect instant soil, it won't work. You need to check moisture, temperature, and occasionally turn or aerate the layer. But the payoff is substantial: richer soil, higher yields, and dramatically reduced costs over time. This isn't just a green tip. It's a system that can replace multiple bags of purchased soil over seasons while improving your garden's resilience. I've also integrated this with companion planting in my beds. Fast-growing greens on top of the settling waste layer benefit from the warmth and nutrients, while slower crops below establish deep roots into decomposing material. Herbs, tomatoes, and root vegetables all respond positively. And if you're curious about precise readings to maximize this effect, The Earth Scout 5-in-1 Soil Cub, linked in the description, is a tool I rely on every week. It tells you soil, moisture, temperature, salinity, air temperature, and humidity in seconds, helping you make decisions that save water, reduce stress on plants, and optimize nutrient absorption. Finally, here's one important note for anyone who's really serious about garden efficiency. Don't stop at just one raised bed. Once you've got the process down, you can totally scale up across multiple beds, or even, integrate with small-scale hydroponic systems. The principle is universal. Just one intentional layer of organic waste, managed the right way, honestly creates soil that feeds your plants season after season. This is exactly how serious gardeners stop buying bag after bag of soil, cut down on waste, and build a thriving, self-sustaining garden. If you've stuck with me this far, you know this isn't surface-level advice. These are methods I've tested repeatedly, and they work in real gardens, raised beds, and hydroponic systems. If you want to see more strategies like this, practical, measurable, and results-driven, subscribe to Farm Logic now and check out the link in the description for the Earth Scout 5-in-1 Soil Cub. It's a game-changer for anyone serious about soil and plant health. Remember, gardening isn't about following trends or buying bags of soil every season. It's about working with natural processes, monitoring carefully, and giving your plants exactly what they need to thrive. One proper waste layer in your raised beds does more than fill soil. It builds life, and that's the difference between just growing food and actually mastering your garden.